Princess Lyra sat on the balcony of her high tower, her long silver hair glowing softly in the light of the alien sun. Below her stretched the capital city of the Varian Empire, with its spires rising like giant crystals and floating platforms, carrying people from one place to another. The city shimmered in colors humans had no names for. Traders shouted their wares in a dozen alien languages, and the scent of exotic fruits and strange metals filled the air. Yet, despite the beauty and excitement below, Lyra felt nothing but emptiness. Every year, the Empire held the grand festival to find a suitor for the princess. Every year, nobles from across the galaxy traveled here, showing off their wealth, power, and influence. And every year, they left without winning her favor. Lyra was not plain, nor was she weak. Her green eyes glimmered with intelligence, and she carried herself with grace and quiet confidence. But the nobles seemed more interested in the titles they would gain than in her as a person. They praised her beauty in public, but in private they whispered that she was too clever, too independent, and too different. She sighed and turned away from the balcony. Her father, Emperor Vorin, ruled the empire with a strong hand. He loved his daughter deeply, but he could not understand why so many powerful nobles seemed afraid of her. "Lyra," he said softly, stepping into the room, "you worry too much. There will come a suitor who sees your worth." Lyra shook her head. "Father, I have waited for so many years. Every noble arrives, every noble leaves. None see me. None care about what I think or what I feel." The Emperor sighed. "The heart is hard to find, my daughter. But remember, the galaxy is vast. Not all suitors are from our empire." Lyra's eyes lit with curiosity. "You mean outsiders? Aliens from other systems?" "Yes," Vorin said. "Perhaps one of them will be different. Perhaps one will understand you." Lyra smiled faintly but did not feel hope. She had seen outsiders before, diplomats and traders, but none had made her feel anything more than polite interest. She turned back to the balcony, her gaze lingering on the floating platforms and glittering spires. "Maybe it is time for a change," she whispered to herself. The festival began with a grand parade. Nobles from distant planets arrived in ships shaped like animals, stars, and strange geometric forms. Each wore dazzling garments that reflected light in ways the human eye could barely imagine. They carried gifts for the princess, crystals that sang when touched, fruits that changed flavor with every bite, and machines that could dance on their own. Lyra watched silently, her hands folded in front of her. Her eyes scanned the crowd, noting who moved with arrogance and who moved with humility. As usual, the alien suitors tried too hard, their gestures forced and empty. They bowed deeply, but their eyes never truly met hers. Then among the crowd she noticed something unusual. A small delegation had arrived in a sleek silver ship that seemed simple compared to the others. Its lines were smooth and practical. From it emerged a human man, tall and confident, wearing a uniform that spoke of both authority and curiosity. His name was Captain Ethan Ward, and he was an explorer and engineer from a distant human colony. He did not bow, nor did he wave ostentatiously. Instead, he walked steadily, observing everything around him. His eyes were sharp, taking in the details of the palace walls, the floating platforms, and even the workers moving supplies. He nodded politely to the attending guards, but did not try to impress anyone with wealth or power. Lyra's interest was piqued. She had never seen a human before, and something about his calm confidence felt different. Unlike the alien nobles, he did not appear afraid of her intellect or status. He seemed to move through the crowd as if he belonged, yet he did not demand attention. The festival continued, and the nobles presented their gifts. One by one, they approached Lyra with bows and grand speeches. Some sang, some recited poetry. Others tried to demonstrate their superior skills in combat or strategy. Lyra remained polite but unmoved. Their words sounded hollow, their actions empty. Finally, Ethan approached. He carried no gift except a small device that looked like a simple tool, unlike the extravagant presence of the others. Lyra raised an eyebrow, curious about this human who dared approach her without a show of power. "Princess Lyra," he said, his voice clear and steady, "I have heard much about you. I wanted to meet you not with gifts or poetry, but with respect. May I ask you a question?" Lyra's green eyes widened slightly. No alien suitor had ever spoken to her like this. "You may," she replied cautiously. "What do you enjoy most?" Ethan asked. What brings you joy in your life here, aside from your duties? Lyra blinked. That question was so simple, yet no one had ever asked it. Most only spoke of politics, alliances, and appearances. She looked at him for a moment, studying his calm, earnest face, and then she spoke. I enjoy the gardens, she said quietly. I like to walk among the glowing plants and watch them react to the emotions of those around them. It is peaceful there, away from the demands of court. Ethan nodded thoughtfully. I would like to see them. Perhaps you could show me someday? Lyra felt a small flutter of excitement. To an alien noble, a simple walk in a garden would be beneath them, not worthy of attention. But this human asked, not to show power or status, but to understand. Later, as the festival continued, Lyra found herself watching Ethan move among the palace staff. She noticed how he helped a young worker struggling with a floating platform, how he fixed a small mechanical problem with ease, and how he spoke to the kitchen staff with genuine interest. Other nobles mocked him quietly, saying that a human had no place here, yet he ignored them. Lyra felt a strange warmth. Here was someone who did not care about appearances, wealth, or power. Here was someone who saw the world differently. She found herself wanting to learn more about him. The day ended with a grand dinner where nobles sat in elaborate chairs and feasted on foods from across the galaxy. Lyra sat quietly, observing the interactions. The alien nobles tried to impress her with stories of conquests and inventions. Ethan, meanwhile, asked about her interests, her thoughts on her empire, and her hopes for the future. By the end of the evening, Lyra realized something important. This human, unlike any alien, treated her as an equal. He did not fear her intelligence, nor did he seek to control her decisions. He simply listened, understood, and respected. That night, Lyra returned to her balcony. The stars of her planet shone bright, their light reflecting off the crystal towers below. She thought about the festival, the nobles, and the human who had arrived from so far away. Father was right, she whispered. Perhaps someone from outside our empire will see me as I truly am. She did not yet know if Ethan would become that person, but for the first time in many years, she felt a small spark of hope. For the first time, she imagined a future where someone could see her mind and heart, not just her title or appearance. High above the city, the wind whispered through her silver hair. Princess Lyra knew that her life was about to change. The festival was only the beginning, and this human might just be the first to break the walls that had kept her lonely for so long. And somewhere far away, Captain Ethan Ward looked out at the alien city from his ship, unaware of the role he was about to play in changing the life of a princess and the future of an empire. The morning sun bathed the palace in a golden glow, making the crystal spires sparkle like 1,000 tiny stars. Princess Lyra wandered through the royal gardens, where alien plants swayed and shimmered. Some leaves glowed faintly when touched, while flowers pulsed with colors that reflected emotions. It was her favorite place in the palace, a quiet sanctuary away from politics, ceremonies, and the constant pressure of being a princess. Today, she was not alone. Captain Ethan Ward walked beside her, careful to step lightly on the soft pathways. He had asked to see the gardens, and Lyra had agreed, curious about this human who had treated her with such respect. These plants are amazing, Ethan said, crouching to examine a small glowing shrub. I've never seen anything like them. Do they respond to mood? Lyra smiled. Yes, they react to strong feelings, joy, anger, fear. They do not lie. That is why I like them. Here, no one can pretend. Ethan nodded thoughtfully. I think I understand why you come here. In a place like this, the world feels simple, even if only for a moment. Lyra glanced at him. You understand more than you realize. Most visitors to the palace do not care about gardens or small things. They care only about titles and power. Ethan shrugged. Humans are curious. We notice details. Sometimes the smallest things are the most important. Lyra's green eyes studied him. He was unlike anyone she had ever met. He did not bow excessively. He did not try to impress her with wealth or strength. He asked questions, observed carefully, and treated her as an equal. That alone made him extraordinary. As they walked, Lyra noticed that several of the garden platforms were tilting slightly. Some bridges connecting floating sections wobbled when stepped on, and a few decorative energy beams flickered weakly. These structures are old, she said quietly. The palace gardeners and engineers know how to maintain them, but the work is difficult. Sometimes I worry that someone will get hurt. Ethan crouched beside a support beam, inspecting it with keen eyes. I see what you mean. These beams look strained. If one fails, it could be dangerous. He looked at Lyra and smiled. Would you allow me to help? Lyra hesitated. Even though she admired Ethan, it was not common for a human or anyone, really, to handle the palace's delicate structures. I do not know. The engineers are trained for this. They might be offended if I let you interfere. Ethan shook his head. I am not here to compete with them. I just want to make it safe. Please trust me. Lyra studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Very well. But be careful. These gardens are fragile. Ethan worked quickly, using tools humans had invented for precision. He adjusted support beams, strengthened walkways, and repaired weak energy channels. His hands moved confidently, even when handling parts that seemed impossible to fix. Lyra watched silently, amazed at his skill. Meanwhile, some nobles noticed the human working openly in the gardens. They whispered to one another, their voices filled with disbelief and disdain. What is he doing? One noble hissed. A human dares touch the princess's gardens. He is reckless, another said. He will ruin everything. Yet Ethan continued without fear. He moved with a calm determination that made even the experienced palace engineers pause. Slowly, even they began to nod in approval. Lyra felt a strange warmth in her chest. Here was someone who did not care about tradition or status. Here was someone who simply solved a problem, with courage and intelligence. By midday, the garden's bridges and platforms were secure, glowing energy channels humming steadily once more. Flowers and leaves seemed to brighten in response, their light reflecting the sense of safety and order restored. Lyra stepped closer to Ethan. I cannot believe how quickly you did this, she said. Even our best engineers would have taken days. Ethan shook his head with a humble smile. Sometimes new perspectives help, and humans are good at seeing problems in ways others do not. Lyra felt her admiration grow. This human was clever, brave, and kind, and he had not done this for recognition. He had done it because it needed to be done. Not all watched with admiration. A group of alien nobles lingered nearby, their eyes narrowed in suspicion and jealousy. This is unacceptable, one said to the others. A human is stealing the princess's attention. We cannot allow this, another added. He has no title, no wealth, no rank, yet he acts as if he belongs here. This will not stand, they began to plot in hushed tones. If the human dared to gain the princess's favor, it would upset the careful balance of power among the nobles. They could not allow an outsider, especially a human, to appear superior. Later in the afternoon, the palace announcer declared a challenge, a display of skill, strategy, and ingenuity for the suitors. Each noble would demonstrate their ability to solve problems or complete tasks, and the princess would observe. Lyra's eyes found Ethan in the crowd. He had not asked to participate, but something in her heart hoped he might. She wondered how a human would approach a challenge in a world so different from his own. As the first nobles stepped forward, performing feats of strength and complex calculations, the audience applauded politely, but Lyra's interest waned. Their actions were impressive only on the surface. Each move seemed rehearsed, lacking creativity or courage. Finally, Ethan stepped forward. A murmur ran through the crowd. A human was not supposed to compete. No human had ever done so. Ethan looked at the challenge, a complex puzzle involving the palace's floating platforms, energy beams, and delicate mechanisms. He did not hesitate. Using careful observation, logical reasoning, and clever improvisation, he began to solve it in a way no noble had considered. Some of the alien spectators gasped. Some engineers nodded in surprise. The nobles grew tense, whispering among themselves. A human cannot succeed, one said. This is absurd. But Ethan continued calmly, his hands steady and precise. Lyra watched, her heart racing with excitement. For the first time, she saw someone act not out of pride or ambition, but out of intelligence, courage, and respect for the task itself. By the end of the demonstration, the puzzle was solved, the platforms stable, and the mechanisms operating flawlessly. The crowd erupted in a mixture of astonishment and reluctant admiration. Lyra's eyes shone with pride. She realized that this human was different in ways the Empire had never seen before. As the nobles retreated, angry and embarrassed, Ethan approached Lyra once more. It seems the palace is safer now, he said, smiling gently. Lyra could hardly believe it. Here was a human, untrained in alien tradition, yet capable of solving problems the Empire's finest engineers had struggled with. You are remarkable," she said softly. Ethan shook his head. "I just did what needed to be done. Anyone could have done the same if they looked at it differently." Lyra laughed quietly. "No, not anyone, you. You thought differently, acted bravely, and helped without expecting reward. That is rare." The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the gardens. Lyra felt a small spark of hope. Perhaps this human, so unlike anyone she had known, could be the first to see her for who she truly was. And as she watched Ethan speak to the engineers, patiently explaining solutions and listening to their concerns, she realized that the Empire might never be the same. Humans were different, yes, but perhaps that difference was exactly what the Empire needed. For the first time in years, Lyra did not feel lonely. She felt curiosity, excitement, and a strange new possibility. The festival was far from over, and the alien nobles would not give up easily. But Lyra knew one thing clearly. This human had stepped forward, not for power or glory, but to act with intelligence, courage, and respect. And in doing so, he had already won something no suitor had ever won before. Her attention, her trust, and perhaps in time her heart. The palace gardens were quieter now, bathed in the soft glow of alien lights as evening approached. The glowing plants reflected Lyra's mixed feelings, excitement, curiosity, and a hint of worry. Captain Ethan Ward had worked through the day repairing the floating platforms and energy channels, earning the admiration of palace engineers and even some of the cautious nobles. But he had also made enemies. A small group of nobles whispered furiously near the edge of the gardens. "He thinks he can take our place," one hissed. "He is just a human. He does not understand our ways. He dares touch the princess's gardens without permission," another added. "This is an insult to tradition." Yet Lyra did not notice their whispers. She was focused on Ethan, who now carefully examined a series of energy bridges linking the higher platforms. His hands moved with precision and confidence, adjusting controls and recalibrating the energy flows. Lyra stepped closer. "Captain Ward," she said softly, "you have done so much already." "The engineers said everything would take days, yet you finished it in hours." Ethan shook his head. "I did what needed to be done. Sometimes you only need a new way of looking at a problem." Lyra studied him. "You are different from anyone I have ever met. You do not care for wealth, rank, or appearances. You simply act." He smiled faintly. "Actions speak louder than titles, Princess Lyra. That is what I have learned in my travels." The moment of peace did not last long. The group of alien nobles, jealous and outraged, decided to take action. One of them, Lord Kalen, stepped forward, addressing the palace guards in a loud voice. "This human is reckless," he declared. "He has interfered with the palace's property, disobeying our customs. He should leave immediately." The palace guards hesitated. Some were loyal to the emperor and princess, others were nervous about alien tradition. Ethan remained calm. He looked at Lord Kalen and bowed politely. "I mean no disrespect," he said. "I only sought to make the garden safe. If there is a problem, I will fix it according to your rules." Kalen sneered. "You understand nothing of our rules. A human cannot act as if he belongs here. You must be punished." Lyra stepped forward, her voice firm. "Enough! Ethan has not harmed anyone." "He has only helped," the nobles gasped. Few had ever seen Lyra speak with such authority against their criticisms. Kalen's eyes narrowed. "Princess, this human cannot be allowed to shame us in public. There must be a trial, a demonstration of skill, as is tradition." Lyra's heart quickened. The festival had included challenges, but a human had never been expected to participate in a formal trial. She looked at Ethan, concerned, yet a small spark of hope glimmered. Ethan met her gaze calmly. "I will accept your challenge, Princess," he said. Not to impress anyone, but to show that problems can be solved regardless of who faces them. Lyra felt a surge of admiration. His courage was quiet yet firm. Even when threatened, he remained respectful and composed. The trial was held in the palace arena, a grand structure floating above the gardens. Alien spectators filled the stands, their many eyes glimmering with curiosity. Hovering drones recorded the event, their lights casting reflections on the crystal surfaces. The alien nobles smirked, confident that no human could succeed in the challenges designed for their kind. Lyra sat in her throne, her eyes fixed on Ethan. She felt nervous and excited. This was more than a contest of skill, it was a moment that could change everything about how humans were seen in the Empire. The first challenge involved navigating a maze of energy bridges while balancing delicate devices that measured precision and coordination. Alien nobles approached it with practiced movements, their bodies and minds trained to follow tradition. Yet, despite their skill, they made small mistakes, ignoring subtle cues in the maze that required creativity rather than rote training. Ethan stepped forward. He paused, observing the maze carefully. Unlike the nobles, he did not rush. Instead, he noted patterns, recognized energy flows, and adapted to the environment in a way that seemed natural. Slowly, steadily, he crossed the maze, correcting minor errors as he went until he reached the end flawlessly. A murmur spread through the crowd. Some spectators whispered in disbelief. Others began to cheer softly. Lyra felt her pulse quicken. The human had done something the best-trained nobles had struggled with. The second challenge tested intelligence and strategy. Nobles had to manipulate energy nodes to power a floating platform while avoiding triggers that could shut the system down. Many relied on memory or brute calculation, expecting the nodes to follow predictable patterns. Ethan examined the system. Predictable patterns rarely hold in unknown systems, he muttered. He traced connections carefully, using logic and observation rather than assumption. Slowly, the platform stabilized, energy nodes humming in perfect harmony. Even the palace engineers were impressed. He sees it differently, one whispered. He does not think like us, yet he succeeds. Kalen scowled. A human cannot outthink a noble. This is impossible. Lyra shook her head. Perhaps impossible is only in your mind, she said quietly. The final challenge was the most dangerous. A precarious set of floating walkways above a deep garden chasm, with energy channels that could collapse if handled incorrectly. A small error could result in injury, and many nobles hesitated, fearful of failure. Ethan did not hesitate. He moved carefully, recalibrating unstable platforms, balancing delicate energy flows, and guiding floating bridges into place. At one point, a section of the walkway began to tilt sharply beneath Lyra's eyes. Without thinking, Ethan jumped, catching the tilting bridge with precise timing. The crowd gasped. Few had ever seen such bravery combined with skill. The nobles whispered urgently among themselves. Some were furious, others awed. Lyra's heart raced. She realized that Ethan's courage was not reckless. It was calculated, informed by intelligence, and guided by care for others. He did not act for glory or recognition. He acted because it was the right thing to do. Finally, the last platform stabilized. The garden below glowed brighter, as if responding to the success of the human who had dared to challenge tradition. The judges, impressed and astonished, declared Ethan the victor. The alien nobles could not argue. A human had outperformed them in every test, using skills they had never considered. After the trial, Lyra approached Ethan as the crowd dispersed. You were incredible, she said, her voice filled with awe. I have never seen anyone act with such intelligence and courage. Ethan smiled humbly. Thank you, Princess. I only did what I thought was needed. I wanted to help, not to compete. Lyra felt a strange warmth in her chest. Here was someone who saw the world differently, who acted with kindness and bravery, and who did not seek to impress her for selfish reasons. She realized that perhaps humans were exactly what the Empire needed, a fresh perspective, a new way of thinking. The nobles still whispered, but their power felt diminished. They had expected a human to fail, to humiliate himself, and to confirm their superiority. Instead, he had succeeded, earning not just respect but admiration from engineers, staff, and even some cautious spectators. Lyra stood taller, her green eyes shining. For the first time, she felt hope, not only for herself but for her empire. Perhaps one day the rigid traditions could change. Perhaps courage, intelligence, and respect could matter more than wealth, status, and fear. She turned to Ethan. You have shown me something important today. You are not like the others. You see the world differently, and I think I want to see more of it with you. Ethan looked at her, his expression gentle. I would like that, Princess. I would like that very much. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the palace gardens. Alien stars began to shine above, reflecting the promise of a new era. Humans and aliens could coexist, learn from one another, and perhaps together, create a future neither had imagined before. And for Lyra, the princess who had been ignored by every suitor, the presence of this human, brave, kind, and wise made her realize that being seen, truly seen, was possible after all. The festival was not over, but Lyra's heart had already changed. She knew that her world, and perhaps the entire empire, would never be the same. The next morning, the palace was buzzing with excitement. Word of Captain Ethan Ward's success in the gardens and the trial had spread quickly. Nobles whispered angrily in the corridors, their pride wounded by a human's achievements. Some engineers, palace staff, and even a few cautious spectators were now quietly rooting for him. The festival, once a display of wealth and status, had transformed into a test of courage, intelligence, and true skill. Princess Lyra watched from her private balcony as Ethan prepared for the next contest, the main challenge of the festival. The arena, a massive floating structure above the central gardens, gleamed in the sunlight. Floating platforms, energy bridges, and mechanical puzzles filled the area. The crowd gathered, buzzing with anticipation. Even drones hovered higher than usual, ready to capture every detail. "This is it," Lyra whispered to herself. "This will show everyone what he is capable of." The challenge was designed to test intelligence, agility, and strategy all at once. Nobles were to navigate a complex series of floating platforms while manipulating energy nodes to activate defensive systems. Any mistake could send them falling onto a safety net far below, or worse, trigger a failure that would collapse the puzzle entirely. The first alien noble approached confidently. He leapt from platform to platform, his movements precise and rehearsed. Yet when it came to activating the energy nodes, he hesitated, unsure which sequence would work. A section of the platform shook violently and the crowd murmured. The noble tried again, but it failed, and he stumbled to the side. Some spectators laughed softly. Others gasped. Ethan stepped forward. He did not rush. He crouched, studying the platform's energy flows and nodes carefully. He observed patterns the nobles had ignored. Where others relied on memory or tradition, he relied on logic and reasoning. A hush fell over the arena as he began. Step by step, he crossed the platforms, adjusting the energy nodes with precision. When a section of the bridge began to tilt, he quickly used a temporary brace to stabilize it. When a puzzle seemed unsolvable, he created a simple device to reroute the energy safely. Every move was deliberate, confident, and clever. Lyra felt her heart race. She had seen courage before, but this was different. Ethan was not reckless. He calculated risks carefully, always considering the safety of others. He was brave, not for glory, but because it was the right thing to do. The alien nobles watched in disbelief. Their skills, honed for years, were being outmatched by someone they considered weak and unworthy. Murmurs of shock spread through the stands. Some whispered angrily, "A human cannot do this." Others quietly began to nod in respect. Even the palace engineers who had doubted him at first could not hide their admiration. "He sees it differently," one murmured. "He does not think like us, yet he succeeds where we failed." Halfway through the contest, the final test awaited. A narrow, floating walkway high above the gardens. Energy currents ran dangerously along the sides, threatening to knock anyone off balance. One wrong move could be disastrous. Ethan moved carefully, adjusting each platform and stabilizing the currents. Suddenly, a section tilted sharply beneath Lyra's eyes. Without hesitation, he leapt, using a human-engineered brace he had designed in seconds to stabilize the platform. The crowd gasped. Some nobles froze, unable to believe a human had acted so decisively. Lyra's green eyes shone with admiration. "He is amazing," she whispered. "He does not act recklessly. He acts with thought and courage." The spectators cheered as Ethan completed the challenge flawlessly. The platforms glowed, the energy nodes hummed steadily, and the floating bridges stabilized perfectly. Even the palace drones seemed to focus brighter on him, recording his achievement for posterity. The judges, a council of senior engineers and royal advisors, conferred briefly. Finally, they declared Ethan the victor. He had succeeded where every noble had failed, combining intelligence, courage, and creativity in a way no one had anticipated. The alien nobles were stunned. Their pride and status had been challenged publicly. Some whispered angrily, others glared with disbelief. Kalen, the noble who had tried to discredit Ethan, clenched his fists. "This cannot be," he muttered. A human has bested us all." Lyra ignored the nobles. She stood and clapped, her eyes fixed on Ethan. You have done what none of them could, she said softly. You have shown me and everyone else that courage, intelligence, and respect matter more than titles or wealth. Ethan looked at her, his expression calm but gentle. I only did what was needed, Princess. That is all anyone can do. After the contest, Lyra led Ethan to a quieter section of the palace. The crowd had begun to disperse, whispers of admiration and surprise echoing in the corridors. You were incredible, she said, her voice filled with awe. Not just because you succeeded, but because of how you did it. You were careful, brave, and clever. And you did not seek recognition, you acted for the right reasons. Ethan smiled humbly. Thank you, Princess. I did what anyone should do when faced with a problem. I wanted to help, not to show off. Lyra's eyes shone. For the first time, she felt a sense of hope that she had not known in years. You make me see the world differently. Maybe it does not have to be like before. Perhaps we can change things together. Ethan tilted his head slightly, a small smile playing on his lips. I would like that. I would like that very much. Not everyone was pleased with this change. The jealous nobles convened secretly in the palace corridors. This human has humiliated us all, Kalen said. We cannot allow him to continue. The princess seems interested in him. This is unacceptable. Another noble nodded. We must find a way to discredit him or challenge him again. If he gains influence, our position will be weakened permanently. Lyra, however, was already thinking differently. She had seen bravery and intelligence in someone who did not conform to tradition. Perhaps the Empire did not need rigid rules, strict hierarchy, and obsession with appearances. Perhaps it needed courage, respect, and fresh ideas, qualities that Ethan had shown in abundance. That evening, as the sun set and the alien stars began to shine, Lyra and Ethan walked together in the palace gardens once more. The glowing plants reflected the events of the day, pulsing gently as if acknowledging the triumph of courage over pride. You have changed how I see many things, Lyra said softly, not just about humans, but about my people, the Empire, and even myself. Ethan looked around at the gardens, the glowing bridges, and the floating platforms. Change is always possible, Princess. Sometimes it starts with a single step, or a single action that others never expected. Lyra smiled, feeling a warmth in her chest. For years she had felt ignored, unseen, and unappreciated. Now, for the first time, she felt understood. Not for her title or her beauty, but for her mind, her heart, and her courage. You have given me hope, she said. And maybe together we can help others see the value of courage, intelligence, and respect, not just titles and wealth. Ethan nodded. We can, Princess. We can start here with the Empire, and then see where else our actions can reach. The palace shimmered under the alien stars, and for the first time in centuries, the festival had become more than a display of power. It had become a symbol of possibility. Humans and aliens alike could learn from each other. New paths could be forged. And one human had already shown the way. Lyra looked at Ethan, her heart filled with a quiet certainty. I think this is only the beginning. Ethan smiled. It is only the beginning, Princess. The future is waiting, and we can face it together. As the night deepened, the palace gardens glowed brighter, reflecting the promise of change, courage, and collaboration. For Lyra, the princess who had once been ignored by every suitor, the presence of this human had sparked a transformation, not only in her heart, but in the Empire itself. The morning sun rose over the Varian Empire's capital, casting long shadows across the floating spires and crystal platforms. Princess Lyra stood on her balcony, gazing at the city below. The festival had ended, and the palace buzzed with whispers and quiet conversations. Words of Ethan Ward's courage, intelligence, and skill had spread like wildfire. Nobles who had once mocked him were forced to reconsider their attitudes, while engineers and staff spoke openly of the value of fresh perspectives. Lyra felt a strange mix of pride and excitement. The human had not only impressed her, but he had also begun to change the way the entire empire saw outsiders, and perhaps even themselves. For the first time in her life, she felt that someone truly understood her. Ethan entered the balcony chamber quietly, carrying a small bag of tools from the palace gardens. He smiled when he saw Lyra. "Good morning, Princess," he said. "I thought I might check the gardens one more time before the day begins." Lyra's green eyes softened. "Good morning, Captain Ward. You have already done so much. The gardens are safer, the bridges are stable, and you have even changed the minds of many here. I think it is time you rest." Ethan shook his head. "I am fine. There is still work to do. But I came here first because I wanted to speak with you." Lyra's heart quickened. She felt the same curiosity and admiration that had drawn her to him from the very beginning. "Speak then," she said. Ethan took a deep breath. "Princess Lyra, I have seen your people, your empire, and your traditions. I respect all of it. But I also see what can be improved, what can be changed for the better. You are capable of leading not just with power, but with wisdom and courage. And I would like to help you, if you allow me." Lyra studied him, her mind racing. She knew this offer was more than guidance. It was partnership. Humans were rare in her empire, and most nobles feared them. Yet this human had proven himself time and again. Perhaps together they could bring new ideas, new strength, and a brighter future. I would like that, Ethan," she said finally. "If you will stay and work with me, we can begin to make changes together." Ethan's eyes brightened. "I will, Princess. I promise to do my best." Not everyone in the palace welcomed this new path. Lord Kalen and his allies gathered in a private chamber, their faces shadowed with anger. "This is unacceptable," Kalen growled. "A human, with no title or rank, has gained the princess's favor. We cannot allow it." Another noble, with a nervous glance at the open balcony above, whispered, "But the people respect him. The engineers respect him. Even some of the council. They are beginning to listen to him." Kalen slammed his fist on the table. "That does not matter. Traditions must be preserved. We cannot let the empire be led by a human's ideas." Meanwhile, Lyra had already begun planning. She met with engineers, palace staff, and even some younger nobles who had been inspired by Ethan's actions. Together they discussed ways to strengthen the empire's defenses, improve trade routes, and make life better for ordinary citizens. The changes were small at first, but visible. Bridges and platforms were stabilized, energy systems optimized, and minor conflicts among nobles were resolved with new solutions. The palace staff smiled more freely, no longer fearing the rigid hierarchy that had governed them for centuries. One afternoon, Kalen confronted Lyra directly in the main hall. "Princess," he said sharply, "this human is changing everything. Your empire is being disrupted by someone who does not understand our customs. How can you allow this?" Lyra met his gaze steadily. "Because, Lord Kalen, the empire will not survive if we cling only to tradition. We must adapt. We must learn, and we must act with courage and intelligence. Ethan has shown us that. I have seen it with my own eyes." Kalen's face twisted in anger, but he found no words. Lyra's confidence was undeniable, and for the first time he realized that her strength was more than just a title. It was wisdom, courage, and the ability to see beyond pride. Ethan, standing a few steps behind Lyra, said quietly, "We do not seek to disrespect tradition, Kalen. We seek only to strengthen it, to make the empire better for everyone." Kalen turned and left, fuming silently. But Lyra knew that the first cracks in his stubbornness had formed. Change was inevitable. As weeks passed, the empire slowly began to shift. Humans were no longer seen as outsiders to fear, but as allies who could bring new ideas. Engineers and scholars worked with Ethan to develop tools, machines, and strategies that combined human ingenuity with alien expertise. Lyra continued to grow alongside him. She listened to his ideas, offered her own, and guided the empire's resources to implement changes carefully and wisely. Nobles who had once ignored her began to respect her judgment. The festival, once a stage for showing off wealth and status, became a symbol of merit, courage, and intelligence. Through it all, Lyra felt a new sense of purpose. She had been ignored, overlooked, and underestimated for years. Now, she was seen, not for her title or appearance, but for her mind, her courage, and her vision. And beside her, a human had helped her reach that realization. One evening, as the alien stars shimmered above the palace, Lyra and Ethan stood on the balcony overlooking the city. The glowing platforms below reflected their lights, creating a shimmering mosaic of color. "You have changed so much here," Lyra said softly. "Not just the Empire, but me. I no longer feel alone, I no longer feel ignored." Ethan looked at her, his expression calm yet full of warmth. "You were never truly alone, Princess. You just needed someone to see you for who you really are. I am glad I could help." Lyra smiled, a sense of joy spreading through her chest. "You have given me more than guidance. You have given me hope. And perhaps something even more." Ethan tilted his head, curiosity in his eyes. "More?" Lyra nodded. "Yes. Courage, partnership, and friendship. I hope in time it could become even more than that." Ethan's lips curved into a gentle smile. "I hope so too, Princess. I will do everything I can to support you in all ways that matter." The palace buzzed with life, but a new energy had taken hold. The staff smiled freely, engineers collaborated with renewed enthusiasm, and even the nobles, slowly, began to accept the changes. The Empire, once rigid and proud, was learning that courage, intelligence, and respect could triumph over arrogance, tradition, and fear. And for Lyra, the princess who had been ignored by every suitor, life had taken a remarkable turn. She had found someone who saw her, respected her, and worked alongside her to create a better world. A human, brave, and clever, had stepped forward, and, in doing so, had changed the destiny of an empire. As the stars reflected off the crystal towers, Lyra took a deep breath. She looked at Ethan, and for the first time in years, she felt truly at peace. The festival had ended, but a new journey was just beginning. A journey of courage, partnership, and hope. And somewhere in her heart she knew that together, they could face anything the galaxy had to offer.